Hey everyone, Sassy Mouse here, and this is not an informational video, but as part of my self-care vlog series that I do occasionally, I'm going to try, we'll see how this goes, try to take you along the journey of making hot cocoa bombs. I have done a little bit of chocolate work before. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I do know enough to get an end result that works. I have done hot cocoa bombs once. I did 3 batches at that time because there were different issues, and by the end I did have a product that was pretty much okay. So I'm hoping that that learning will help out here. So let me start by talking about a few things if you are also interested in doing chocolate work as a self-care activity or just something that you just want to do, right? Which admittedly, anything fun that you do is self-care. So, chocolatiering, if that's something you want to do, is self-care whether you intend it to be or not. So anyways, the first thing if you're going to work with chocolate is deciding what kind of chocolate you're working with. On the easiest end of the scale is to actually work with fake chocolate, and if this is your first time doing chocolate, that might be a better choice. However, fake chocolate, which is chocolate that has vegetable oil in it, does not taste as good as real chocolate, which has cocoa butter in it. If you're curious what kind of chocolate you have, if you read the ingredients, usually, so for example, this one says sugar, dry whole milk, cocoa butter. So it'll be within the first couple ingredients. It'll tell you whether it has vegetable oil, sometimes it'll say hydrogenated vegetable oil, or cocoa butter. If there's any vegetable oil in it, it will be easier to work with, but the flavor generally suffers. I did not work with fake chocolate the first time I did it, and trust me, it took a little bit of trial and error to figure out. But if you're willing to keep trying and hopefully not do anything super catastrophic to your chocolate, then you can work with real chocolate the first time. It will probably just take a lot longer and be a little more frustrating, which, cool, fine. If you have the tolerance for that, then awesome. It was a little bit frustrating when I first did it. I actually was not making hot cocoa bombs, I'll admit. These are a little harder because they're bigger. I was making regular chocolate truffles. So in making those, I learned quite a bit. They were smaller, which was nice, and it was okay if I fucked up and didn't temper my chocolate properly. Which brings me to my point that if you are going to use real chocolate, which is chocolate with cocoa butter, you absolutely need to make sure your chocolate is tempered at the end. There's a couple ways to do this. The way that I think is kind of finicky, and I personally never tried because it sounds honestly kind of difficult to me, is to keep your chocolate in temper, which is to never heat it above a certain temperature where the cocoa molecules actually melt and break apart. I'm not that careful, and at the time that I first started doing this, I didn't have my double boiler. I didn't think to just make one out of random kitchen utensils, which you can do. I did actually buy one, but you can just put like another pot or a bowl inside of one of your cooking pots if you have a kitchen, which admittedly is a prerequisite for working with chocolate. So at the time I was melting my chocolate with the microwave, which is super duper finicky and has a high likelihood of you getting above the no longer in temperature. So what do you do if you get there? So there's 2 easy-ish ways to temper your chocolate. There are actually a few other ways, but the 2 easy ways are to set aside about 1/3 of your chocolate and wait for your melted chocolate to cool down to the tempering temperature, then add that 1/3 back in, or to use a product like my cryo, which is freeze-dried cocoa butter, and mix that in at the tempering temperature. Oh, tempering temperature. I can say words. Words are good. Alright, cool. So, I choose to use freeze-dried cocoa butter because it is one of the easiest. It is kind of expensive out the gate, but you use very little of it. And it has worked pretty well. The other thing I learned is use a scale. So you need, hang on, let me double check this because I wrote it on here, I believe. Okay, you need 1% cocoa butter, your freeze-dried cocoa butter, for every, 1% of it needs to be cocoa butter. So if you need 100 grams of chocolate, which is a standard size chocolate bar, you will need 1 gram of cocoa butter. I want to point out I'm using Tony Chocolonely. I can speak today. And these are bigger than a standard chocolate bar. They have 180 grams, and yes, I am using grams because holy fuck, the US customary system is stupid. So these are 180 grams, so about half of a bar is where your normal size chocolate bar will land. These are nice because they give you quite a bit of chocolate to work with, and it's really high quality, which is nice. My second tip is go slightly above 1%. If you don't measure it quite right and you go a little bit below and things just don't go right, you end up with a product that you may have put a whole bunch of crap into and then find out, well, it's not setting, and now what do I do? I actually go to about 1.5%. Yes, I'm going to go through my cocoa butter faster, and there may be other repercussions for that I am not aware of because, like I said, I haven't done chocolate that much. But it consistently tempers when I do that. I do use a scale, so I actually have 2 scales. I have my big scale for measuring my chocolate, and people who use drugs will find this funny. I have my milligram scale for measuring the cocoa butter. Yes, that many people do use these for drugs. I am, in this context, using it for food. If you do use yours for drugs, make sure you clean it off and use something to separate your cocoa butter from the thing, which you should do anyway. It's a powder, it goes everywhere. Just because you don't want to accidentally dose people if they weren't expecting that. And if you have the money, it may be worth it to get a separate one of these that's dedicated to just the kitchen. Measure your stuff. So for every 100 grams of chocolate I use 1.5 grams of freeze-dried cocoa butter. The other thing is, if you do something to mess up your chocolate, you can recover it most of the time. If you burn your chocolate, you're fucked. So be aware, watch your temperatures. Which brings me to this device. You can use other thermometers, but the problem I found is most thermometers do not go low enough for chocolate. I wrote it on my box because I don't remember these things. When you're tempering your chocolate for milk chocolate, it's about 91 to 93 degrees Fahrenheit. So, I was saying, if you accidentally fuck up your chocolate, there are a few things you can do to salvage it. It may not be able to turn it into the thing you intended to make. One of the big ones is if you seize your chocolate, you will never make a hard shell out of seized chocolate. However, you can add heavy whipping cream to it and turn it into a ganache, which could be really nice on top of or inside of a cookie or cake or something like that. So you can salvage that. If you heat it up too much, I believe, you can also cause the cocoa butter and the cocoa solids to separate, which leads to these white ribbons throughout it. It doesn't necessarily taste bad, and it may still temper, but it can look a little weird. That one is honestly one of the easier ones to save. And of course, if you do not temper your chocolate correctly, assuming you have not put things that will prevent it from tempering in there, you can scoop the chocolate back out, heat it back up, let it cool back down, add the tempering of medium again, and start over. Which is actually why I suggest the first few times you do this to check if it's in temper before you add any fillings of any kind. If you are making chocolate for yourself and you don't care if you get fingerprints on it, hands by themselves are fine. If you do want to gift them to someone, or if you do want to prevent fingerprints, having a pair of gloves and some rubber gloves over them is going to be really helpful. Gloves just in themselves are going to get chocolate all over them and they're going to leave plastic prints. The rubber gloves help keep those clean, and the gloves on the inside help keep your fingers and the heat from them from affecting your chocolate. So that's important if you don't want it to be gross. You may notice I've also removed all jewelry from my hands. I like to keep clean, especially because these are going to be gifted to people if they turn out okay. Also, maybe if they don't, we'll see. But if I'm going to be washing my hands a whole lot, I don't want things like my watch or my ring to be collecting nasty under them and contaminating everything. So I have washed my hands already. I'll probably do that again in a second. But first, it's the holidays and I'm doing a project, so I need to make myself a drink. This is currently empty. So let's do that. Alright, so I have all the things I need to make my drink.